Is it your decision to waive these rights and enter a guilty plea because you are in fact guilty?
It is.
How do you plead to aiding and abetting false statements in writings and under accusation 23 SC 190514?
Guilty.
If this case had gone to trial, the state would have shown the following. On December 3rd of 2020, the defendant did appear before a meeting of a Georgia Senate Judiciary Subcommittee in Fulton County, Georgia, with co-defendants William Rudolph Lewis Giuliani, Ray Sterling Smith III, and other individuals associated with Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated, also known as the Trump Campaign. During the subcommittee meeting, Giuliani and Smith, acting as attorneys for the Trump campaign, made the following false statements. One, that at least 96,600 mail-in ballots were counted in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia, despite there being no record of those ballots having been returned to a county election office. Two, that 2,506 felons voted illegally in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia. Three, that 66,248 underage people illegally registered to vote before their 17th birthday prior to the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia. Four, that at least 2,423 people voted in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia who were not listed as registered to vote. Five, that 1,043 people voted in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia who had illegally registered to vote using a post office box. Six, that 10,315 or more dead people voted in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia. And seven, that Fulton County election workers at State Farm Arena ordered a poll watcher and members of the media to leave the tabulation area on the night of November 3rd, 2020, and continued to operate after ordering everyone to leave. The false statements were within the jurisdiction of the Georgia Secretary of State and the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, who were each conducting investigations into allegations of fraud in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia. Once completed, these and others investigations affirmatively determined that there was no widespread fraud that could have affected the outcome of the 2020 presidential election in Georgia. The false statements were made with reckless disregard of the truth and with conspicuous purpose to avoid learning the truth. The defendant attended and abated Giuliani Smith in making these false statements by assisting with the execution of the December 3rd, 2020 Senate Judiciary Committee meeting that was held in Fulton County, Georgia. The false statements were used as part of a plan by the Trump campaign to solicit the Georgia General Assembly to disregard the certified results of the presidential election in this state and instead to unlawfully appoint non-elected presidential electors in violation of their oaths to the Georgia Constitution and to the United States Constitution. Similarly, false statements and solicitations were made to state legislators in Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and the defendant was present and assisted with the execution of those meetings. And she was in attendance with Giuliani in Arizona and Michigan and Pennsylvania. That would be the factual basis in which the state would have proceeded on, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity to address the court. As an attorney who is also a Christian, I take my responsibilities as a lawyer very seriously, and I endeavor to be a person of sound moral and ethical character in all of my dealings. In the wake of the 2020 presidential election, I believed that challenging the results on behalf of President Trump should be pursued in a just and legal way. I endeavored to represent my client to the best of my ability. I relied on others, including lawyers with many more years of experience than I, to provide me with true and reliable information, especially since my role involved speaking to the media and to legislators in various states. What I did not do, but should have done, Your Honor, was to make sure that the facts the other lawyers alleged to be true were in fact true. In the frenetic pace of attempting to raise challenges to the election in several states, including Georgia, I failed to do my due diligence. I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges. I look back on this whole experience with deep remorse. For those failures of mine, Your Honor, I have taken responsibility already before the Colorado bar who censured me, and I now take responsibility before this court and apologize to the people of Georgia. Thank you.
And then thank you, Ms. Ellis. Ms. Ellis, I have a few questions that I have to go over with you. Do you understand the nature of this charge that as it's been reaccused against you?
I do.
And you heard the rights that you would waive by going forward with this plea. Do you still wish to waive those rights?
Yes.
And are you pleading guilty today because you agree that there is a factual basis as outlined by the state to support this guilty plea?
I do.
Well, I find that there is a sufficient factual basis for the charges, and I find that this plea of guilty is knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently entered.